class, we're going to continue with chapter 10, which is production and operations management. As you read through the chapter, you should learn how to explain the importance of production, identify and describe production processes, explain the role of technology in the production process, identify factors involved in location decision, and that's a key one. Oh, that hits me really, really, really big. Explain the job of production managers, discuss controlling the production process, and determine the importance of quality. So, production and operations management. These ovals just give you a flow, almost like a flow chart, kind of like where you are able to see what happens in each stage of the production and operations process. The inputs, the raw materials and resources that are needed to convert it to do a conversion process where it adds value, and then to the outputs where it actually is something that you can tangibly sell to a customer for a fee. So we are going to go through those just to understand what they mean and how they're used in operations management. It's going to be the use of resources. Of course, it's going to be workers, but it's also machinery to convert your materials to finished goods or into an end product service. And the operations management oversee that process, and they manage people and machinery to ensure that the conversion of materials and resources happen in the most efficient way. Here are, as examples, very cute pictures of the process of the production system and the inputs and the transformation and the outputs. And it just gives you an idea of really at a global scale kind of what the primary inputs are for various types of organizations: a trucking firm, a computer factory, retail establishment, an auto body shop. Not all organizations are production oriented, output oriented to something you can physically touch. Sometimes it's just more or less something that people provide in a service, which is the county sheriff's department. Their output would definitely be a peaceful community and lower crime rates, something that you can't touch, but you obviously know that it exists. The strategic importance of production, well, really, it generates money, not only just to pay your employees and lenders and anyone else who you owe money to, but it also adds value to stockholders. And stockholders are truly important because that's what the reason why you're there, because they decided to create this organization, but they want their profit, they want their reward for the success of the organization. So there's no way to underemphasize the importance of production. But if you have a production department and operations that's effective, it does keep your costs of production lower. It does boost the quality of your goods and services, and that's really important because you want to retain your customers, and you want them also to tell people about you so that you can grow. But it also allows you to meet the needs of your customers as they demand it, and it allows you to reinvent yourself, but also to extend what you're doing to other areas of products and services. Mass, flexible, and customer-driven production. I would say for machinery or cars, mass production allows you to make products in a large quantities in combinations. Also, specialized skills. So, using mechanized operations, you can streamline some costs and be more efficient in your services. Flexible production is cost effective, but it does things in a batch type of technology, batches, and it also uses information technology to be more creative and flexible in what they produce and how it is produced. Customer driven, that really does work well in the service oriented, but it is also important in this in products manufactured. But basically, it's generally geared on the demands of the customer, what they want, when they want, and how they want it made. Very, very important. So the production processes, it includes analytic, synthetic, continuous, and intermittent, and each one are described here. What your main emphasis in this chapter is not to become an operations manager, but it is to understand, to conceptually understand what's involved in these processes and how they all fit together. Technology cannot be overemphasized because when you're dealing with any type of production, there always is some sort of technology involved. You can use a robot, you can use computer aided design, you can use a flexible manufacturing system, but in the end, technology has its process, and it's important to know how to use technology to create the most value for your customers and the product or services that you receive or that you provide. The location decision. As an operation manager, there are a number of decisions that are needed to ensure that you are making the right decision on what location you'll be working or what location is best for your business. And here are some of the factors that are considered. Obviously, transportation and physical factors and human factors. Clearly, you want to make certain that you are in proximity to the markets or more materials that you'll need, and you have availability of transportation alternative if necessary. But there are also other factors, physical factors, including water and energy. But it really depends on the organization that you're trying to establish and the location. How would it impact your ability to produce a product or service to your customers in the most efficient and effective way? Human factors clearly would be the labor. How many people are available with the skills that you need to get the kind of output that's necessary for you to get customers? Zoning and other local regulations are important as well, and usually the reason why most organizations choose not to conduct their businesses in certain areas simply because of the code violations that they will be ensued simply because of the strict zoning regulations. So communities and other conditions are important, and as a business decides to move in a location, it has to consider the community. It has to consider their needs and if what would the impact be on their day-to-day life, increased trafficking, different types of individuals living in or working in the area, the value of the homes that will be as a result of the business being located in that area. So they have to consider that as well in their decision. And it's also, we would hope that they would use ethics and other to decide, to make certain that the community would not be adversely impacted, but they will hope that the community would be served best by providing more jobs. But next, the job of production managers. This gets into the detail of what they do, but I would suggest that you look at the process as a whole and why they do what they do and how it all fits into the big scheme of operations. And we're talking about how the production managers work and how it flows. There's a nice little chart here at the bottom of the screen where that shows the flow in a little oval shapes and how the planning process begins, and you select the layout and you implement the production plan. All in all, what you want to do is make certain there's a planning process, there's a logistical process, there's an implementation process, and there is a controlling process where quality management and quality assurance is pretty much the main focus. So the managers, they oversee people and work ethics and machines that convert these materials into finished goods and services. They don't actually do the work, but they do understand how the work is to be performed in order to evaluate to make certain the work is done efficiently. The planning process allows the manager to choose what goods or services they want to offer, but also to use the product ideas into some specifications that's finalized and design the efficient facilities to produce those products. The main thing is, what do we want to give to our customers? Actually, what do they need? What do we have that we can use to provide that final specification, or what do we have to get, or what do we have to acquire in terms of assets to meet that final specifications, and how do we design our facilities to produce? So the oval here gives you a good, clear indication, very straightforward indication of the process of the planning of the production. This is a process layout, and again, not all organizations work this way, but the general scheme here is just to show what's involved in each process. On the top of the screen, it talks about the process layout and the product layout, the fixed position layout, and the customer orientation layout. These can be extremely involved processes, but the bottom line here is it is a very sophisticated process, a very sophisticated work when you're operations manager and you have to oversee a production of a car, for example, or production of some sort of computer that will be provided to customers for sale, or maybe microchips that you provide, or iPhones that you provide. Again, the process can very well be varied depending on the organization and the type of product that they're producing. But the general layout and the machinery process, it just gives you some idea of what happens in each phase. And I think understanding the phases more so than understanding how it's done is the most important information that you should glean from this chapter. So in detail, the product layout just allows it's almost like a production line in some ways, but it does give you a process of who does what and what area does what part of the process. And it lays it out in a format that can be understood, and mostly a visual layout of what area and what process gets done at what area and what location. And this product flow on here as a layout just gives you an idea of what happens in each phase. As you see the phase continue, you will see more and more of a finished product that looks much, much more like an automobile. The fixed position layout really produces the products in the spot, and it does have one area where you get the items you need, the people who's needed to be there, and the equipment that comes with it, all to produce that one item or that one group of items. And again, it depends on the organization and what they're trying to produce, and it's no wrong or right here. It's just a matter of what is best for the organization. Is a fixed position layout the best way to organize our operations for our production, or is another way to more efficient? And it's again more or less most efficient, cost effective, and best meet the needs of the customers and of the organization. Here's a customer oriented layout, more or less geared towards a service type of organization, but not exclusively. And here in this example, it just shows the flow of an individual patient through various departments within a hospital organization. And again, the process of production operations is very important because it keeps the organization organized. It keeps the organization within knowing what services they provide and the flow of processes for that service or product. And it does give the customers a product that they can rely on because it does ensure quality, because you have a uniform or a more efficient production process that produces the best quality product. Implementation. This is the big deal. It's really the buy the lease decision. Whether you're going to produce the needed product, or you're going to do it in-house, or you're going to have someone outside, or you're going to lease it. These are major decisions. And obviously, they consider more than just the financial cost, but they also have to think about any reliable outside suppliers, any other needs that they might have. And if there's a need for confidentiality. Again, this is just a part of a big whole of how you're going to implement the plan and what types of services or what kind of decisions that you'll need to make in order to get the production process in place. Selecting the suppliers. Again, determining on your quality that you will need, you'll have to make certain that the services that you get from outside parties are ensured the dependability of the delivery and services that you offer to your offered by competing companies. One of the things that I think is most important, because it's the asset of the organization that it ultimately gets sold for profit, is inventory control. Organizations like Dell have a very strict inventory control process, and many organizations have changed their process based on the just-in-time, which is Dell's process. And just-in-time process means that they minimize the amount of inventory that they maintain in their operations at any time. They use statistics, they use past experience, and they use very strong vendor relationships to ensure that only the inventory that they need to have on hand, they have on hand. And as you know, with most organizations that provide a product, inventory is critical. And keeping the inventory values consistent, but also ensure that you have everything that you need to meet the demand of your customers is quite important. And there's a delicate balance here. It's very difficult to say for sure how much you need. So a lot of estimations involved. But in the end, it requires managers to balance their need, what they have on stock, to the needs against the cost of carrying the inventory. It's very important to make certain that there's an adequate balance there. There's some statistics involved, in fact, just to statistically evaluate what level of inventory is needed at all times. But at the bottom line, inventory control is a very, very important part of an operational manager's job. And he's evaluated because it is very expensive to carry inventory. So they need to make certain that their material requirements planning is done. It is making sure that they have the parts they need to produce the output, but at the right time and the right amounts. And it's no right or wrong. It's just a question of the right balance that's most important here. controlling the production process. Um, we need to have a set of procedures that make certain that people and materials and machinery are needed in the right time in the right amounts to produce the maximum efficiency. So planning, scheduling, routing, dispatching, and follow-up is all critical components to ensure that the process of production is controlled. And in front of you is a Gantt chart. And the Gantt chart I've used a number of times, not necessarily for the production process, but to follow a project from beginning to end and what processes need to be done at certain times. This Gantt chart here is based on the actual quantity of items that they are producing and what they need to have. So it does give them some overlap of what type of invoices that they actually generate based on the products that they are going to be producing. What the Gantt chart does is it does provide some level of systematic flow. It does help them plan better. It gives them opportunities to ensure that the processes that they are involved in is being monitored and are completed on time. It's almost like having a flow chart of what we're going to have done. Here is a PERT diagram. Before I go further, I don't want you to think that you'll have to learn how to create these diagrams. I would suggest that you look at the diagram and get an idea of what it's trying to show you, what purpose of that diagram is, and what information it can't give you. The PERT diagram, if you follow the letters or follow the numbers, excuse me, you'll see that it not only gives you the project that they're working on, but it tells you what happens and how long it happens in each phase. Um, it is not something that all organizations use, and in fact, unless it's a highly mechanized process, usually a PERT diagram is not used at this point, but it does have a useful purpose. The main point of understanding or looking at these two diagrams is what information it provides the production and operations department. Quality is quite important. So the process that an organization decides to use for producing their products is very important, because at the end we have to ensure that the product is free of deficiencies. It's good quality, that they can account for their quality and ensure that it gets below a certain percentage. Because we know that if your product is not good, then your customers are not going to want it, and then they're not going to recommend it to anyone else. So it's very important that we ensure that our production processes culminate and provide the best good for the price that their customers pay. Benchmarking is one of the process of analyzing other organizations and their best practices. Why does it matter if we benchmark? Well, sometimes you can actually learn from the mistakes of other organizations. But in a benchmarking situation, what you're doing is comparing their organizational practices to yours and seeing what they're doing better, what they're doing much better. How efficient are they in their production process? How efficient are they using their resources? An organization can look at it from a top level perspective, or very, very specific to a particular process. But in the end, benchmarking is a very, very good way to ensure that you're doing what's necessary to provide good service or good quality products to your customers. So what we want to do is make sure that the goods that we are making available has some kind of established quality standard, and the quality standards can be determined really in part by benchmarking and also by customer surveys and what they actually want to see in a product. The Six Sigma concept, which is something I did very, very briefly in my past, it just allows the organization to have this very quality-centered orientation in everything that they do. It is a very, very sophisticated way to ensure the highest level of quality. It helps organizations reach that almost nearly error-free product production process. ISO standards is again the International Standards for Standardization. It is a mission that promotes the development of standardized products to facilitate trade and cooperation across national borders. Um, the most important thing here is to understand what the role is, and because it has over 146 nations involved in this process, it does allow for some requirements that say at a national, at an international level, what is quality for this process? What is quality by that standard? And it is used as a measure for organizations to determine if their process is at that standard. It's almost like a benchmark that would be used for finance when you're going into the marketplace and stocks and bonds. Use the S&P 500 or the Russell 500. Those kind of benchmarks say this is the standard that by which your stocks are going to be compared with. So if we want you to make certain that if you meet that standard, you're doing fine. If you exceed it, you're doing even better. And this ISO standard is somewhat like that in terms of concept. So the main thing about operational and process management for you to know in this class is that it's a very involved process. It is not isolated solely to production of a product, but it also is useful for service. It is important to note how important the role of the production manager is and what information he can provide, and also ensure that customers get what they need. At the end of the day, though, no matter what the production process that an organization chooses to use, the end product has to be quality. And using standards by the ISO or the Six Sigma all lead to one thing. Can we provide a very close to error-free product that has little to no defects, and that we can find a quality product that all our customers demand from us? So the production process is a very, very important process, but at the end of the day, it must be quality that's being produced. I thank you very much for your time, and I will talk to you next time.